19, our first meeting. Notice of new business. I have none, council.
None, your worship.
None, your worship.
City manager. Adoption of the agenda by consensus then.
Aye.
All right.
And we have the minutes of the December 10th, 2018.
So moved, your worship.
Moved and seconded. No errors or omissions. Okay, in favor. Opposed, carried. No business arising. Presentations and delegations. We have the draft capital budget. David Joy, General Manager of Corporate Services.
Draft capital budget first, or
Did I
draft
say?
Yeah.
operating?
Oh, capital.
Can I
yep, and
talk
then
to operating
later.
first? Let me talk to operating first.
Are we doing operating first then?
Operating first. It leads right into capital. Well, welcome, your worship and councillors. Always excited to present the operating budget. This particular one has some excitement in it on its own, but we're actually in the cusp of doing something special. This will kind of set up our way of thinking as we go into the financial framework discussions. And it's very important to keep what we're doing here for this current budget in mind as we go into those discussions in January, February, and March. The important thing for me, because I'm a person, I'm a resident, I'm a taxpayer too, is to make things clear. Quite often, I think, when we look at how the province requires us to report a budget, how our external financial statements appear to the public, can be daunting and confusing. What I've tried to do since I've been here over the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, is to simplify. And this is the approach I've taken this year. What I present here is not just for your information, but also for the medias and the general public at large. So let me start. What I've done, and I'm going to do a little differently this year. Normally I could just wing it and speak to the slides, but I've made some notes because there's some important things I know I'll forget to say that I want to, which really sets the stage for as we go forward over the next 3-4 months to talk about the financial framework. The annual budget is arguably Council's most important policy document. It states in the most basic terms as to where the municipality's money will be spent. If these are not the municipality's priorities, then Council and the general public might ask why the money is spent in this manner. For citizens and the media, the most conspicuous decisions of Council are probably those related to the provision of services: snow removal, grass cutting, pothole filling, garbage collections, community services and programs, building a new RCMP building, or a little further into the future, considering another multi-recreational facility, et cetera, et cetera. The purpose of this particular presentation is to provide you not just with the numbers, but more importantly, the perspective and the background behind those numbers that really tells the story. The purpose is to educate both long-serving and brand-new councillors. I know that our long-serving councillors here probably know, it's a budget. I know all about the budget. I think what you'll learn today will open your eyes a little bit. And for the new councillors, and obviously this will be an education and an orientation. This will also give you some time to ask questions, not only today, but as you think of them for the next week or so. This is a draft budget, so we're looking for your input and your thoughts. And to generate some thought, conversation, discussion, whether it's with council or with the general public or media questions. Many municipalities present draft budgets that identify deficits. So I'm not presenting you with a budget where we're in deficit by 5 or 10%. I know from my experience, other municipalities will have that, and then councils will direct administration to cut costs or to generate new revenue. What we've done here, as I said before, we have balanced the budget based off of some assumptions, and you can agree or disagree or send us in another direction. We can decide to increase tax rates or lower tax rates. We can decide to maintain tax revenue or to increase tax revenue based off of increasing or decreasing assessment values. We can use reserves, debt, etc. So I am presenting to you today operating and capital budgets that are, in essence, balanced based on the same tax rates, levels of service, no increase in staff, nothing controversial nor transformational. But there are challenges, both current year and what we may face in the future by maintaining the status quo. Well, the financial framework discussions coming up in February may not affect the budget process for this year. What you learned today should be kept in mind for when we renew, refresh, and develop the guiding principles for all the financial policies and mechanisms we have available to us. So, with the operating budget this year, we've kept the tax rates the same. Last year, we kept tax revenue the same. It should be noted that tax rates for residential, we've looked at this in many ways, and it's part of the financial framework discussions. And generally for residential properties, we are in the mid to lower range of comparable communities. And when I say comparable communities, I've done that in many different ways. Many different ways to Sunday, if you will. And you will see that as we go forward. Assessment values overall have increased by, have hardly increased at all, but by 0.031% for 2019. And last year they decreased by almost 4%. Inflation keeps going on. Last year I believe it was 1.7%. This year it's 2.6%. Yet I will note that our discretionary spending, such as materials, contracting services, and other items have decreased again this year. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the managers and directors and our Director of Finance for not only holding the line, but really finding those cost savings or cost cutting that we could do. We keep looking at 3 or 4 year trends in what we actually spend, and does that make sense? And the important thing, does the budget make sense? We want to not be in a position where we overtax the public. We just want to be fair with our costs and go forward from there. The allocation of Peace River Agreement funds, there is an effect on the operating because we do have what we call C5 projects, which are operating expenses, and they are covered off according to policy with PRA funds. Peace River Agreement funds. There was a significant effect on the budget this year. We have long-term loans, and when they get to a 10-year period, the Municipal Finance Authority will adjust the interest rates, and in this case, interest rates decreased, which provided us with quite a savings. I think, if I recall correctly, $815,000. I wanted to show this slide because municipally or legislatively we are required when we present the budget for council's approval in future weeks. We're required in the bylaw to present it in such a manner, and the revenue is by accurate description, municipal taxes, sale of services, return on investments, but the expenditures are shown by department or division. And it's a little more difficult to explain variances, or it's not as clear to the public, what's behind the increases in protective services or public health or recreation and culture. I have the items in brown there because those 3 line items really don't show in the bylaw. They are absorbed in 3 of the lines up above. but I thought it would be important to show that we use accumulated surplus to cover depreciation, and that there is a collection for other governments, the requisitions, and that we receive when we receive grants, we record the full amount in revenue, but under expenses, which you can see under here, you can't tell that we're transferring out most of those grants to the capital program. But I thought it's important for you to just see that what I've been trying to do here. I do want to, whoops, I've got a little far here, sorry. The actual cash-based income statement, this is important to me because now we get into clarity. And we can build an audit trail. Our actual budget that you approve is around $114 million. But again, within that are requisitions, the capital grant revenue, and depreciation. So it's important that you realize that here we've got the revenue and municipal taxes, and that when we explain expenses, it's in the description of like salaries, HR costs, contract materials, utilities. It's a little more clear. And we show that the pass-throughs, which are the provincial requisitions, depreciation, and transfers out to the capital program. Let's get down here. For the current year, for 2019 budget, the basic variances are that our municipal tax revenue will increase because the tax base and total assessment values increased for commercial businesses. That was most of it. We have actually the revenue from commercial businesses will increase by $590,000 and light industry by $66,000. It's partially offset by the 1.6% decrease in assessment values for residential properties. And as I said before, the overall assessment values just went up slightly by 0.031%. Services provided to other governments. We had lost the revenue from the 9/11 dispatch services. Of course, that's offset by the expenses that we no longer have for that service. The pool subsidy and recreation, the pool subsidy has gone down because our expenses have gone down for that, and that the volumes of the people using the recreational programs and the rentals have decreased. From our belief, it's due to the economic downturn, but we're reflecting the trends. We're not trying to overstate our revenues. We're looking at the last year or two, and that revenues have gone down in that area. For staffing, salaries, wages, we have a collective agreement with a 2% increase built in, plus we have our employees' grid progressions. There is some increase in overtime, and but again, we're trying to be realistic with our expenses and following the trends that we've had in the past. On discretionary spending, I'd referred to this before. Last year, in 2018, we cut out $754,000 in discretionary spending, and this year another $226,000, so almost $1 million, and that's in the face of, again, inflation that keeps occurring. The interest expense decrease, which I described earlier, and as you can see. And this is just a note for the future, is that next year we won't have that $815,000 favorable variance for interest expense. And what that's done for us in 2019 is basically pay for the salary, wages, and employee benefits. All else taken into consideration, all the other lines. So that's the high-level perspective of that. So. And that's why I put in that little note about the tax rate, because we've kept the tax rate the same this year or in the draft budget. I I just wanted to show this. This is part of the audit trail that I built for, so that we understand all the pass-throughs. Again, we receive Peace River agreement. Sorry, where am I here? Let me get back here. Peace River agreement money and the community measures agreement money, and the federal gas tax. With the one-time revenue here that we've got from the PRD economic development, we've applied to the PRD. So that's part of our budgeted revenue. We got operating grant revenue of note. The transit to cover offset those costs, $785,000. A handy dart transit, $485,000. This is all very expensive. The gaming grant, consideration of that, $750,000. We offset operating expenses with that, and possibly during our financial framework discussions, we might be discussing how we wean ourselves off some of these things to offset operating, so that we can handle it ourselves if these grants significantly reduced or were eliminated. So we record the receipt of these grants in their entirety under review, but under revenue, but that portion that is related to capital is subsequently transferred to the capital program by expensing or removing that portion from the income statement. The net amount remaining offsets the operating expenses incurred for the purpose given by the issuance of those grants. And expenses out, you can see that Peace River agreement, again, this is all through the income statement, but we flow it out to the capital program, $18.3 million, and $2.4 million, all from the Peace River agreement. It's all related. Of note here is where I've highlighted $340,000 favorable. This is in the utilities area. So it's a reflection of a combination of increasing our utility rates marginally, I think by 1%, and keeping costs under control. So it's a very good sign that in addition to the usual amounts we put into reserves, we've been able to generate an additional $340,000 to put into those reserves for capital projects. In the income statement, we have these projects for which we built in expenses, and most of these studies, plans, and initiatives are really about planning for the future and improving the quality of life of its residents and businesses, and for the long-term sustainability of the city as it continues to grow, mature, and expand. While the recommendations will influence the increasing of infrastructure for the city, these initiatives cannot be capitalized and depreciated. They are operating expenses. These expenses are paid and offset by the Peace River Agreement grant money and not by city residents. The Peace River Agreement use of funds policy allows for funds to be expended in support of projects and initiatives of municipal responsibility within city boundaries and for city-owned assets, and in support of a healthy community supporting an industrial workforce, and to maintain an economic hub supporting businesses serving the industry sector, to assume an advocacy role for services outside the city's area of responsibility and outside the city's boundaries. So this is why we can enter into these studies and strategies. Very important for the long-term sustainability for the community. And I will note, I mean, the charrette is the most expensive one this year, $450,000. Very important, and I've given you a list of those projects and the description for it. The charrette itself is the purpose is to revitalize the downtown and the look and feel of 100th Street from 96th Avenue to 110th Avenue with replaced light fixtures. this is part of public engagement, and it's the citizens do want to be engaged. Businesses want to have their opinions taken into consideration. So yes, it's an expensive project, but again, it's for the long-term benefit of the community, and we wouldn't be able to do this without Peace River Agreement money. Or if we didn't have the agreement money, we'd have to wait longer to generate this in order to afford and to include all the stakeholders of the community to really build something special in the downtown area. The economic development strategy, we have applied to PRD to cover these costs too. I won't go through all of these, but I've listed them here. And again, this is built into the income statement expenses. We got just to the Peace River Agreement money, while most of it goes to capital, 10% of it in the green there is slotted for these C5 projects, for our operating expenses. And as you can see, we've funded 1.1 million. The policy says 10%, and we're only taking 5% of that money. We have the other capitals. Our policy says 35% for transportation, roads, facilities 10%, and equipment 15%, and other capital 30%. But by the time we go through our criteria and approve the most needy projects, it ended up that 50% of PRA money will be spent on transportation, roads, and sidewalks, and 33% on facilities. So as you can see here, I mean, from 2014 to 2017, we're generally spending $500,000 to $600,000 of PRA money. We're putting that into operating. It's jumped up in 2018 to 1.1 million. If we had to do all these projects, or if we were going to do these projects anyway, it would have meant 3 to 4% increase in tax rates. So we are thankful for the Peace River Agreement money. Since 2014, we've had 1,138 residential properties have been added, yet the average assessed value for residential properties, while increasing for a time, is now back at 2014 levels. 119 more commercial businesses have opened since 2014. Of some concern is the continued annual decrease in the major industrial assessed values, the formula for which is tied to their depreciation and the lack of reinvestment for the 3 properties within our boundaries. We have a staffing formula which is tied to assessment values. While some, but not all, staffing strain was alleviated during the period of 2015 to 2017 because some of the increases were instituted to just catch up from previous years. We've experienced a decline and or marginal assessment growth for 2018 and 2019, and almost all departments are experiencing more pronounced staffing strain. We can always just get by and defer for just so long, but there is considerable strain to fulfill the strategic goals, objectives, and tactical strategies to satisfy those objectives in an effective and efficient manner. A list of positions of greatest needs from administration will be identified a few slides from here. I wanted to show this slide here. I presented this slide to illustrate the most recent history of how we have administered tax rates. Council has demonstrated prudence and due diligence throughout this period. The tax rate has decreased or remained unchanged 4 out of the past 5 years. Residential, industrial, and commercial business tax rates are 6.32% below what they were in 2014. This has had an effect on the ability to increase staff if we were to go outside of the staffing formula. to complete strategic objectives and to absorb increases in expenses such as inflation, one-time expenses. This year, if we had not had a reduction in the interest on our debt, the increase in HR costs, the union contract grid progressions, yet no FTE increases, could not have been offset, and we would have had to present a draft deficit budget unless we increased the tax rate by 3.15%. If we had not decreased our budgeted discretionary spending by over $1 million over the past 2 years, that would have represented another 3 to 4%. It's my mistake to call it the mill rate. It's tax rate scenario. Anyway, I just wanted to show this. This is the formula to prove that any additional, if we increase taxes by 1%, it would be equivalent to $294,506. Keeping the tax rate the same as last year increases our revenue by $471,000. And that's a bit redundant, I just said it. So in actual fact, if we increase the tax rate by 1%, we'd increase our revenue by almost $766,000. So in this particular year, with an average residential assessment value of $318,000, and with a 1.28% decrease in assessment value, the average resident would have a $20 reduction, $1.50 a month reduction in their municipal tax. The issues, tax revenues essentially remained unchanged for 3 years, but administration responsibilities, especially with the way we're tracking our strategic objectives and tactical work plans, it's really motivated and spurred on administration to try to achieve as much as council has directed us with the goals and objectives. And basing FTE growth on property assessment value growth partially ignores the services and service levels expectations of the public to plan, develop, and properly maintain an increase in land hectares, additional road kilometers, and creation development of subdivisions. We don't take increasing staff lightly. It goes through a robust discussion with all managers, and we apply criteria to each position request. Each position is defended by the general manager or director. And quite a discussion occurs throughout an afternoon or morning or the day to come up with the most deserving of positions that we require. And really, there's pressure everywhere, so everybody that gets up thinks their positions for their department or divisions are the most important. But it goes through a robust evaluation. And these are the lists of positions that we do have, and they cover the network systems, security and service. Oh, sorry, my fault. Got away from it. Sorry. I was on a roll. I was just keep going. Let me get back here. The the criteria, sometimes there's a legislative requirement. We've got strategic priorities that need to be supported. The health and safety requirements of the corporation. Sometimes a position will benefit more than one department. There's corporate efficiencies at times with a new position. Ongoing cost recovery. Some positions will generate revenue and offset, at least partially offset costs, reduce risks, and provide us with in-house expertise instead of using consultants, offsetting high workload or additional workload, and stakeholder value service delivery.
So just to sort of expand on this is very unique what we do here in Fort St. John. So when each FTE position is presented to the management group, each position is weighted and ranked and comes up with a numeric value based on these 10 criteria. So one might be very high in legislative and health and safety, but might be very low in-house expertise. So each position goes through a very robust discussion, goes through the criteria, is rated and ranked. At the end of the process, as you can appreciate, there's going to be some positions that have a numeric value higher than others based on these 10 criteria. So we try to be very objective about it. We try to understand the value to the organization and to the community. And then once we've got that, process has been concluded, then we rank them from the highest valued position down to the lowest. And then we wait until we understand where the assessments are going as to which of those positions, starting from the highest ranking position, how many of those positions we can fill. So we do this in accordance to your staffing policy, whereby you have, by policy design, have established the number of FTEs based on assessments and the growth in the community. You've entrusted administration to, once we know what that formula indicates, that we do the selection of the positions that are to be filled. And so this criteria is a way of ensuring council has confidence that when we're going through the position selection, that we do it on an objective and criteria-based formula with very robust discussions at the staffing levels. At the end of the day, the positions that rank higher. And like I said, and if the formula says no FTEs or half an FTEs or 10 FTEs, then we know which positions are filled based on your formula. So it's unique. I'm not aware of any other place that actually does it this way. It's got some challenges, and during our financial policy framework, we'd like to talk to you about them. But right now, that's the way it works. It works pretty well. And so in the years when your assessment was growing, the FTEs grew. When the years that your assessments were stagnant or decreased, then your FTEs did not. So that was the intent of that formula. So
I couldn't have said it better myself. But she is right. I've been part of budget discussions for 30 years, and both with personnel, with staffing, and with the capital program, the way we score and assess. I've never experienced it that way. So I think it's a very healthy debate that we have, both in staffing and on the capital side. It's part of the culture here. So with that, I'd like to point out that the top three are in my division. So, all of these are, we'd love to have all the positions filled like this, or additional positions, but we recognize but there is strain, and there is the ability to do things in the time that we think they should be done. So anyway, we point that out. The financial framework, we have all these financial mechanisms available to us and have a responsibility to use them efficiently and effectively. While any development or adjustment to existing guiding principles may not affect this current budget, the city as always takes a forward-looking approach and will be looking with council to discuss and improve all financial tools at our disposal. For example, with the reserves, we have 7.7 million tied up solely for contingencies, and we need to consider what is the real likelihood and potential impact if these contingencies come into reality. Does it exceed what we are currently saving? Surpluses that we have, at times we haven't had good years here, and many, I guess, in the far distant past, before my time. But nowadays we have surpluses, and how should we use them when they occur? Peace River Agreement money, how to effectively and practically allocate those funds. The asset management program, which we are starting up in January, will have an effect on this down the road and may supersede or override part of this PRA policy, or at least affect it. Grants such as the gaming grant, firefighting agreement revenues, and other grants that we apply and offset operating expenses. Do we still want to continue to allocate to offset operating expenses, or wean ourselves away from that? Debt, 70, we have about $33 million of debt right now. A third of that is the Pomeroy Sports Center, and that does affect the tax rate itself. But 70% of this debt is self-funded, whether through utilities or the what I call local improvement levies, but LASs. So this city has been very responsible with its debt and the type of debt we are willing to go within, and it provides us with options down the road if we need to dip into using debentures and debt. Tax exemptions. The city is the second highest provider of permissive tax exemptions in the province. Permissive tax exemptions have grown from 783,000 in 2010 to just over 1 million in 2018. So that kind of growth, do we want to continue with this? Is there something else we can do to help the not-for-profits and the charities and the agencies that are here? Staffing, again, we've discussed that, and tax rates. Really, we have very competitive tax rates. How do we compare with other municipalities? And you'll see that comparison when we have the financial framework discussions. And with that, I'll entertain any questions or comments.
Just before we can get into questions or comment, if I could just bring council back to slide number 11. It's the assessment analysis, because I think council, this slide really does establish the direction that you gave to staff a number of years ago. So if we can just...
Oh, sorry. Again, I had it on my computer. Do we have that PowerPoint up there?
The system's slow.
Okay,
I'll
go
get-
back to slide 11, please.
Getting there. One more.
One more. Next
One more. There we go.
There, yeah, I think. So why I want to draw your attention to this one, because the council a number of years ago said that your financial stability and reflecting the current economic climate was very important to council. And basically, you indicated to the community that we're in this together. As our industry was challenged and we saw employment opportunities reduced, and we saw assessments and people and businesses in some financial dire straits, you wanted to ensure that our budget, our operation also was in step with what was going in and around us on the external environment. And that's why over the past number of years, we've either keep the tax revenue stable or the tax rate stable in order to ensure that we didn't put an undue burden onto the taxpayer while they were already struggling. And that is one of the reasons why we've worked so hard at the staff level to find savings within our current operations, the discretionary budget items, where we could be more efficient and where we could be perhaps even better budgeting. So just on this slide, what this one shows that I think is quite interesting, if you look at 2015 compared to 2019, and if you just look at residential units alone, and I just picked those 2 years, but we look at 14 as well. But in 2015, residential units, you had just over 7,000 units, 7,001 units. If you fast forward to today, you got 7,921 units. So we've increased our residential units. So that's the homes that we provide services to. That's your residents that we provide services to. We've increased that by almost 1,000 different homes. And if you consider 2.4 people per household, it starts building a picture of how many people in our community. Our population has grown. We're providing more and more services to more people. But if you notice under the assessments, the assessment is virtually the same. So in 2014, it was 2.4. In 2019, it's 2.4. So you've got the same tax base to work from to provide services to 1,000 more homes. So you can see the challenge and the tension within the budget in trying to do that. And I commend council that you've been able to do that. You've been able to absorb those additional 1,000 homes where your assessment base has shrunk back to what it was in 2015. And you can see that in the residential taxes that David had indicated to you that in 2017, a homeowner at that time was paying $1,747 in taxes to the municipality, and today they're paying $1,524. That's in part because it's because of two factors. One, there's more people sharing that tax burden, but you also haven't increased the tax revenue. So the benefit to the homeowner was that their taxes was reduced. So when you talk about we're in this together, those two columns, if you look at it, you can see real examples of how through your work and your direction, there's a real value and a benefit to the homeowners. And that's is very significant challenge that you have done and achieved in the last year. The question, and when we get to our financial policies, starting probably next month, the question is, what does the next sort of financial direction look like into 2020 and going forward? We've worked hard at this. We're probably at the level now where we've achieved what you set out to achieve. It really will also depend on what the economic climate is going forward as to how much further you want to address this. The other important thing to keep in mind is, and David talked about that even under our financial policies, is the tax exemptions that we grant to our community groups is now higher than the industrial, the funds we receive from the industrial bodies. So basically, what you've offset in tax exemptions is like the LP plant shutdown, right? Because that's how much we've shifted. Some properties don't pay any taxes at all. And so that's basically negated that all the revenue received. So that crossover has just happened this year, where actually our tax exemptions surpassed the amount of revenue we have received from industrial, and that's based on two reasons. One is our tax exemptions have gone up, but also your industrial taxes are going down because of the tax rate. Industrial properties rarely increase in assessment. They traditionally decrease. They're not like residential properties that traditionally increase. Your industrial properties will always decrease in assessment until they reinvest in their infrastructure again, in their capital investment. So we've made a commitment to our industrial party that we have in our community that will keep the tax rate. And so the highest taxes they paid probably 10 years ago was around $2 million. They are now in the $900,000 range. So it's come down significant over the last 10 years. And that'll only change based on council's policy or if they reinvest again. So you can see how I often say it's like a big piece of puzzle. You change a piece of a puzzle over here, it has an effect over there. And there isn't one single decision that council makes that really sets a direction for your budget. It's a lot of decisions you've made along the way and how they interrelate with each other. So our policy around industrial tax rate our policy around our staffing levels, our policy around tax exemption, our policy around what we borrow debt for, when all combined, produce your budget, right? And so you make a change with any one of them, it changes the whole budget. So this budget being presented to you is basically a status quo based on that direction we received a number of years ago about hold the line, hold the line. We will be able to do that. Staff's worked very hard, and thank you to Shirley and David in particular, but to all the staff here at presenting you with a balanced budget. And certainly we look forward to your thoughts and what you're seeing in front of you, and if that still reflects your direction, and if you want to see changes, where do you want to see those changes? So big thank you to everybody here in the room, all staff for achieving this. It's been a lot of roll up your sleeve and a lot of hard work.
And I think when we go into the financial framework discussions, there will be an education. It'll be eye-opening because we've gathered all the data and the perspective that we need and comparisons with other municipalities and where we stand, and what will our philosophies be going forward? What will our guiding principles be? We are very fortunate. We are financially healthy here, and we should not take that for granted. We should be looking at how can we be more effective and efficient with the money we have available to us and with the money that is coming to us. So on that note, I'll leave it to any comments or questions that you might have.
Thank you, Council. I have a few. So just a question. It's noted in here that the cost of BC Transit has gone up for the Handy Dart for this coming year. Is that split out with Regional District and Taylor? So that's our bottom line increase, and we have increased accordingly over the years. Okay.
It's like a lie detector test. You actually have to say yes or no.
There we go. Sure.
So, that's
You know, those are costs that come directly from BC Transit. It's part of, we have a cost sharing agreement with them in particular as our partner. And any time the cost between the Regional District and Taylor's, there's a split based on time that the anti-darts actually leave the city boundaries and go into Zone 2, which is, or
Right.
Regional District or Taylor. So that is the
Okay.
bottom line.
So the increase, at what point do you think we're going to get to the point where we increase Handy Dart, period? Is there, I was reading a document there where there's only one person in Charlie Lake that uses it? Or is there no one there anymore?
I think no one now.
There was one person.
There was one regular person there, but it's not there now. So they stopped the regular route to Charlie Lake. If there's a requirement, if someone calls, they can still go out there.
Okay. And the Handy Dart goes out to Taylor, and it's actually used by more than just Handy Dart
Correct.
clients. It's used as a transit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The term is paratransit for that.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure that some of the council members here are aware the 340,000 that's favorable for that, the operating expenditures, that is separate from the other components of our capital budget, because water and sewer are standalone budgets. So don't think you can spend that on anything. The C5, if we didn't have the Peace River Agreement money, we wouldn't have those C5 or the staff that are needed to do that. Because we have the C5, we are able to do those. Thank you for explaining the major industry assessment. It's the one class of assessment that's different from the rest. I just want to touch on the surplus and then all the reserves that we have, because we are so flush with that. I think over the years, council has handed over the decision-making for the surplus and where the surplus goes in our reserves to staff, and we're informed later. Should we review that?
That's part of your financial policy framework that's coming up. We definitely would like to sit down and, based on principles, each one of these policies will be based on your principles as to how much goes into reserves and then how funds are allocated and whether any of those can be used for internal borrowing and lending. One of the reasons your reserves have increased lately was because you've been very prudent with one-off non-taxation revenue. So any revenue that you receive from an agreement, such as the BC Hydro agreement, or you've been allocating $1 million from the Peace River agreement out of operating, and plus additional 10% from the Peace River agreement. You've been trying to put away funds into your reserves so that if you lose those agreements, right, you are not reliant on them. And so they've gone into reserves. How and what you use those reserves for will be part of that financial policy framework. We want some clear direction on what are your principles around using that. With regards to surpluses, surpluses a bit of a misnomer, but surpluses from year to year, some of those surpluses really are carry forwards. We didn't get a project finished, or we didn't get a staff hired that we thought we would get, so that they created a surplus. We're trying to be better in that regard. So even if you approved 5 FTEs in the past, we always budgeted them come for January 1st. Well, even if you approve them, you're not going to approve them to March, April. We advertised, we're not going to get anybody here till the middle of the year, and yet we funded them for 12 months, but we only have them for 6 months of the year. So some of the surpluses are generated from that. Some of the surpluses are also generated from the fact that due to some of the staffing strains, we're just not able to accomplish the work plan that we have the money for, but we just don't have the manpower or the labor or the resources to actually deliver. Some of them you can deliver through consultants, but it still takes staff to oversee consultants, put an RFP together. So part of that is just, are we cutting the cloth right? Right? Are we budgeting appropriately? Are we recognizing some of the tensions? And so those questions really can't be answered during a budget discussion. They can be answered in your policy, your financial policy framework, and when you set the big picture of how we manage the financial affairs for the community. That's the reason that in 2019 we want to have that robust conversation with council. We want to walk through where we currently are, what some of the numbers are telling us, and do our policies need to change? Because there just seems some are not working as well as they should, or they just haven't kept up with the current situation. And reserves is one, Your Worship.
Okay, good. I might be wiping off some cobwebs of memories here, but does anyone know what we've got left on the Pomeroy Sports Centre? What do we got, 15 years left? Did we go 25 years?
11 million.
30.
We went 30? So we're pretty much done 10?
We're 11 million. And the last time I looked, I thought it was around 11, 10, 10.8, something like
So
that.
we got 20 years to go on that sucker. 20-year amortization still remaining on
20?
that.
Yeah, okay.
What's
Thank
our
you.
term on that? We'll find out later.
Yep. It's the banker coming out in you.
I know, sorry.
Someone brought up commercial banking.
You mentioned for permissive tax exemptions, we are second highest in the province. Do we know who the first is?
Bank, North
District of North
Vancouver?
Van?
Yeah, District of North Van. I'd have to look.
I think it was
I
them
don't
when
wanna
we
take
looked
their
at
name
it
in
years
vain.
ago. And it's still, yeah, and they, when we looked at it before, their population was about 400,000, ballparking it.
We're close.
Yeah, so we do have a significant permissive tax exemption for a community of our size, which really does speak to we need a community foundation that's functioning properly here. Alrighty, Councillor Boland.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just two things. One was We have 5% of the Peace River grant revenues, including the operating. Is that what we were last year as well? Have we held that?
Probably by the time the year was over, we spent less than 5%. We intend to do these C5 projects, but it keeps getting carried over.
Okay, so there was some carryover. Second thing was just that out of all the budgets that I've sat through and that we've been presented, this is by far probably one of the best wrapped around that I've seen.
Good,
So
thank
thank you so much. Good changes.
Good, thank you.
Excellent.
The important thing is to make it clear. It just gets, as I said before, if we did it the way the province wants us to do it, I mean, there's a reason they want it that way, but to try to explain it to the public, it's better to break it out and provide an audit trail to what the province has. So.
It's great, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Zabinski.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for putting this together. Couple of questions on your handout on the second page. Government transfer revenues in, capital grant revenue recognized. Unconditional provincial other PRD economic development. We've applied for 417. We didn't do it in 2018. Have we ever done it before? And what's the chance of getting it? Because we're using the money.
Right, I'll let Moira explain this.
Through you, Your Worship, thank you for the question. So in 2017, the North Peace Economic Development Commission was deconstructed. All the economic development commissions in the regional district were taken apart. And the regional district will be investigating how they're going to backfill and recreate economic development regionally. Because the Peace River Regional District has a function to collect money for economic development projects, we are able to apply to that fund in the absence of a commission and use that fund to do economic development projects here in the community. So that's what that fund is, that money is about. And we applied for some of those projects in 2018. Some of the ones that did not get completed but are in the works are the traffic circle project around visibility and wayfinding for the 2 traffic circles, one in the city and one on the airport road. The other one is the festival market. And there are, I believe, 2 other projects as well that I can't think of right now. Jennifer, help me. Yeah. Well, she's thinking. Anyway, that's what that funding is. So,
You should get it, so
while it's available,
it
we
is,
will ask
okay.
for it.
Okay.
And in the future, there may be an economic development commission who can take over some of the work that we're doing.
Okay, number 2, sorry, Bill, I have the floor. I've just got a couple questions. On your operating expenses further down, you had transfer to reserves. These are to reserves for solid waste. It went up from 34.9 to 37. Then transfer to reserves from solid waste, 109 to 32. First of all, why do we have 2 separate line items for solid waste when I see there's always one line? So there must be 2 different projects in regards to that, I would presume, because you've named them twice.
Sorry,
And
where
then
is
where
this?
is there a seven? Right over here.
Oh, slide
Operating
some?
expenses.
Let me,
So there's 2 line items, I'm just trying to figure out, there must be 2 different projects
Yeah,
underneath
there-
that? And then why are we significantly reducing $70,000? Is that prudency for that second one to go from 109 to 32?
well, we got,
It's on your piece of paper, I don't know.
yeah,
where it's
no,
on yours.
I've got it here, solid waste. Yeah, you're right. We must, well, we have to have 2 separate accounts for this. I'd have to look at that to explain it. I don't want to give an explanation here unless Shirley knows.
Victor knows.
They could probably answer it. Your Worship.
Victor knows? Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. So there's 2 line items in solid waste. One is disposal, which is our cost to the landfill.
Okay.
And one is collection, which is our contract. So there's 2 different things, and solid waste is one of those things that need to be self-funding too. So there's a reserve for solid waste, so we have to generate enough revenue to offset those costs.
So, and you might not know, but I presume the 109 that went to 32 is probably the collection, because it's generating revenue, and that's why the cost has gone down, why we don't need the operating expenditure for that reserve?
Oh,
or-
sorry, part of that was because of, we had increased the budget to 109 because of the purchase of some new carts. So this is actually bringing it back down to where it
Okay,
was.
so this is roughly where it was a year or 2 years ago, for lack of better words, if I looked, okay. Alrighty, you've answered mine on that. FTEs, position selection, now, is that where the department heads talk to you guys and come up with, just so that I understand, they come up with a scale of, again, through that 1 through 10, they figure that their employee is worth, for lack of better word, no? Correctly.
So the process is, we put out a call to all managers, directors, GMs early in the year and say, what do you need for staffing? Present the position and the reasons why. Those are all brought together to the committee, consisting of directors and GMs, and we often have managers in the room as well. Collectively, we hear the presentation from the person or the department as to what that position's about. This year, we all independently went away on our own, ranked it ourselves individually. Before that, we would do it collectively in the room. But they indicated that there were some heavy hitters like myself that often swayed the numbers. So everybody wanted the opportunity to think in silence and independent and come up with their own numbers. So this year, that's what happened. And then we collect those numbers, we compile them, we take a look at them, we test them, does that make sense? So everybody's ranking that position using those 10 criteria based on what they heard independently, and then we put that together. If there's something that looks really odd, we'll check back in with the director or the manager just to confirm some information. So that's, and then we put it together in a spreadsheet to say which one got the 10, what got 9.5, what got 9.4, and then all the way down, right? We do that process every year. So even if a position ranked the highest last year and didn't get filled last year, right, because we've held the FTEs at 0 for the last 2 years, each year you still have to present your position because there may be new challenges or new strains on the organization that we didn't recognize last year. So just to make the assumption that you were the highest ranking one last year doesn't mean that's what you're going to get this year. So you have to do it, submit it every year. Staff, some of the benefits of doing it that way is staff understand the needs of all the departments, not just their own. It's also that it's done collectively, so we have a buy-in that we understand why we picked this one to be the top and the rationale, and we support that. It also allows the manager and the director to go back to their frontline staff to explain why a position, what didn't rank as high as what it did, and to understand. So it's a bit of an education process as well for all of us, and it's in a way, some ways, team building as well. So we do that work probably early fall and get our list of positions, should any of them be funded.
So, and just on that note, that list of positions that were part of the presentation, those are ranked?
Those are ranked from the highest to the lowest. So
Okay.
what the order that you see them in is the number one position ranked the highest by everybody that was at the table.
Okay,
Okay, that explains that one.
it's just the bullets there, but then
Yeah, I wasn't too sure if that was just everybody or that.
David said the
Right.
top 3 were his, so I thought, are they ranked up there, or did he stick them up there?
They are appearing in the list according to rank.
Okay.
Okay.
You never know. All done?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Worship.
Thanks.
Well,
Counselor Hanson.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to David Joy, General Manager of Corporate Services. Through Her Worship, Mayor Laurie Ackman, I would like to request if Communications wouldn't mind just sharing some of this information with the community as well. I would like to ask if Council is in agreement that we publicize a list of our C5 projects and explain that, in thanks to our Peace River Agreement funds, that it's equivalent to 3.89% of a tax increase, because that's pretty substantial. And I don't think some of my neighbors realize that the significance that the Peace River Agreement dollars has on our budget, and how, by using that money wisely, what it saves the taxpayer. Also to point out that we have the second highest permissive tax exemption in the province. And that is something that, as the year progresses, I'm sure that we'll be exploring that further as well. And did I mark this down correctly? Our residential average currently is similar to 2014
On average, yeah.
on average. So we're seeing so a tax rate decrease of 6.32% as to what we're getting from assessments.
Correct. You know, our saving grace is that there's 1,100 more residences, you know, that type of thing. But per household, yeah, they're paying less.
Maybe we'll sell more houses if we tell people, hey, it's 2014 prices. Get in there. Come to Fort St.
That
John.
happened in 2018. First year in a long time.
Yeah. So thank you to Communications for helping get our message out there as well, and sharing what we know here, but the public would definitely benefit from knowing this information as well. Thank you.
So on that note, I think that we never celebrate where we've come from since having that Peace River Agreement money. I mean, I talk a lot about, 2003, over 50% of our roads were gravel with open ditches. I love those pictures of our grader being stuck and we have to send another one out to pull it out of a residential road. And the significant amount of money that has gone into just the C1 component alone in our budget since we have started getting the Peace River Agreement funds, and why we do it, the principles behind why we do that, and where it's gotten us to, and exactly where we would be if we didn't have it. You'd be praying for snow so that you could drive down the roads. Any rate, City Manager?
Thank you, Your Worship. I read an article today that I thought was interesting that indicated Grand Cache has unincorporated and has gone back to Hamlet. Their tax base and their economy can no longer support an incorporated community. One of the options Fort St. John looked at way back pre-Fair Share was exactly doing that. You would not have been able, we would not have been able to continue as a municipality without that support. So one of the options was to unincorporate and just become part of the regional district. The Fair Share Peace River Agreement, which is one of the strategies to deal with the situation at the time, allowed you to continue to improve your community, invest in capital investments, manage your tax rate, keep it out of the operating, so you and put the money where you argued to the province you needed it. I think the community and councils in the intervening years can take a lot of pride and credit for the fact that they've held the line. They've stayed true to the agreement, and at the end of the day, you see Fort St. John, the community it is, and you compare it to another community just down the road that had to unincorporate because they didn't have the same type of option available to them. So it's a reality for all communities. How well you manage the financial affairs of your communities really shows up. But it shows up slowly, and that's what you're saying. You don't see it because it happens a little bit every year, and you look at the things that we haven't accomplished, because that's just human nature, the streets that aren't paved, the potholes that exist, etc., buildings that aren't built. But really, you need to, you're absolutely correct, celebrate. It's been a huge change in this community. I think personally you've done a great job at adhering to the principles of that agreement as well.
Thank you.
It was, I know, you just thought you were gonna stand up and clap.
That's at the end.
That's coming.
The first Peace, Fair Share Agreement was, what, 94? So, are,
up to.
What are we at, 25 years?
Yeah, coming up to 25.
25th anniversary.
It's been renewed twice, and then
Yeah.
we're in the third version.
Well, maybe we need to do a little celebration on the Peace River Agreement and what we've done.
It's 25 years this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, 2019
Yeah.
is 25 years.
I think we really do need to
Maybe
talk about
spotlight more on
what we've done, and I can tell that our general manager of integrated services has some ideas on what flavor of cake or something.
I was just gonna mention that I will be bringing forward a presentation like I did 2 years ago, just to say how much we've done on the roads portion over the last 20 years-ish. So that, I might have to readdress that a little bit more, add a little bit more to it, but certainly that presentation speaks volumes to how much we've improved over the last 20-ish years because of the Fair Share Agreement, Peace
Yeah,
River Agreement.
I think maybe that we take a look at the bigger picture, what it's done for the community as well. Put some icing on top and a candle in the middle.
And the province needs to be appreciated too, because I mean, this is extraordinary that we receive this money.
We can send them an invitation, see if they come. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Councillor Grimsrud?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just wanted to, first off, thanks for the presentation. Really appreciate it. It's clarified a lot of things, and I appreciate, as well as from the city manager, having a bit of insight into the inner workings of the city. I wanted to agree with Councillor Hansen on putting out some kind of a communication to the residents, just in terms of how, the information that we've gone through in this meeting, to get a bit more of that out to the community in terms of the kind of crunch we're under, trying to make things work with increasing costs that we have no control over, things like that, while still trying to keep the taxes low for the residents. And as Councillor Hansen mentioned, some of the other items on that with regards to how Peace River Agreement money helps that and that kind of thing. Just a quick question about the staff levels, the numbers next to the positions, those are the number of full-time positions that are needed. So 1.0 is one position?
Yeah,
Okay, just
full-time
wanted to
equivalent,
clarify
yeah.
that.
Or a quarter position or a third
Okay,
of a position.
that's what I thought. And then my other question was about, you had mentioned that we were comparing tax rates to different communities of comparable size, or different things that you were comparing them to.
Right, you can slice it all sorts of about 8 different ways with residential tax rates. So it's a fascinating comparison.
Yeah.
And when you take all 7 or 8 comparisons, you realize we're at the mid to lower range of tax rates, which is a credit to this council and previous councils. Yeah.
Right. I'd love to see the comparisons.
You will.
Yeah, okay, great.
Financial framework discussions.
Love to see that. Okay.
So just a point of clarification, would you like to see those comparisons presented to council in an open council report? The financial policy framework, you'll get a lot of information, but it's not something that necessarily we would be presenting in a report. So if you want it publicly, then we can do a report on that. You've got all the information together, David.
Yep, it's very eye-opening, and it makes us look good.
Sure.
That sounds like a public report.
That sounds like something the public would love to see then.
Yeah, so.
I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
That's it? Okay. Councillor Stewart?
Thank you. I just want to follow up on the fair share and the 25 years. I think it is something important that we haven't moved out to the public so that they understand where the position we were as a community and how we've transitioned through the years and through terms of office and the amount of roads and infrastructure that has been put in place and would not have been put in place. And pictures are important. I think a presentation is important. I think it's something that we could look at for a Canada Day presentation to the community of this is where we're at. And I think it's about time we start telling people what the history is and why it's taken so long, because people are missing part of that, and we have such a turnover in the community, they don't get that information. And I think it's a good time to present that whole picture.
So we want to have a mud pit for Canada Day? Is that it? Like, this is what we got.
I'm good.
I'm in.
No. No.
You're in the mud pit, or we can push you in?
Good, thank
We
you.
have that in the minutes, no?
I think it's important to celebrate. It's 25 years. We're gonna, you know what, if we don't do something, we'll miss out. Canada Day is a good day. You know what, I think it has to be all year round. I think that, you know, we've got our Winter Festival coming up that's now, what, 2 weekends with a week in between. We're, you know, trying to expand on that and all of the stuff that we're doing. And the permissive tax exemptions, we would not be able to do if we had Peace River Agreement, or if we didn't have Peace River Agreement money, because we would need every cent to go towards whatever capital project was out there. So I think that there's a huge opportunity for us to, you know, bring together the people who are getting the permissive tax exemption so that they understand where this money is coming from. Because the reality is, when you give a piece of property a permissive tax exemption, those services don't disappear. They still want fire services. They still want RCMP. They still need that connection to water and sewer and everything else. And so that money comes away from them and put on to the rest of us. So all of that what was it you said, 1.2-ish million we're up to? That's the rest of us paying that on behalf of those properties. And so I think that we need to make sure that they're aware that that's where it's coming from. The costs don't disappear.
Yep.
So I think this is a 12-month of 2019 celebration. And Canada Day, yeah, we can do something fun and you know, for that, but I think we need to do it year-round. Anyway,